The act of comparison is something that can really destroy a business from the ground up. It's almost like you got to really just like stick to your guns when you're running an Amazon business and say like, you know what? No, this is me. This is my path.
Hello and welcome to the Wholesale Made Easy podcast, where we believe selling on Amazon shouldn't be hard, and we're going to prove it. My name is Dylan Carter, and I'm one of the co-founders at Vendrive, a tool that helps Amazon wholesale sellers streamline their businesses, stay organized, and land more profitable accounts. I'm sitting down with other successful wholesale sellers, and together we're sharing lessons learned and what it really takes to succeed with wholesale. Today's guest is Cameron Yoder, who's a self-employed Amazon seller currently living in LA. He's been selling on Amazon for more than 4 years, first selling via retail arbitrage, then moving into private label. He's met and helped a large number of sellers through his time working with Viral Launch, and has since then started focusing on his own ventures, helping others fight against mental illness, anxiety, and depression. And although Cameron sells via private label, and this is a wholesale-based podcast, we actually focus more on the mental game of things, such as overcoming failure, dealing with anxiety, depression, and the loneliness factor of being a solo entrepreneur. Yeah, let's dive into that first. Like, how did you get into all this?
I actually got started in the Amazon space or e-commerce in general when I was in college, which was actually not too long ago. I graduated college. It's going to be about 2 years now that I was out, that I graduated.
What was your major?
So I'm business, but okay. That doesn't mean a whole lot.
I love it.
If I would have been serious about business when I was going through college, I probably would not have gone through the whole process of getting a degree, just because honestly, Amazon and e-commerce in general has opened my eyes so much to the benefits of surpassing the college degree for my specific case. I'm not saying that for everybody, but I got introduced to the idea of e-commerce in general through arbitrage. Actually, that was in high school where I started doing arbitrage stuff. I got involved through Reddit. I found out about it through Reddit and talked to a couple guys on there, and they gave some really good advice to me, where their advice was, hey, start out, even arbitrage, just start out with something that you enjoy doing, just to learn the trade. And so I was really getting into kind of men's fashion, male fashion during that time. So I was like, oh, what the heck, I'll just start flipping clothes, flipping Nike stuff, flipping Adidas stuff like that. Small stuff, really low margins, but it got me into the game. And I really enjoyed doing it because I was selling something that I was interested in. And from there, I started just doing bigger and bigger flips, like started flipping workout equipment, started flipping stuff like that. And that just kind of took me through college. It helped pay for my tuition. And from there, I wish I would have gotten into the private label space years ago. I remember I was like looking at this. I was in the middle of doing arbitrage, and I remember seeing this article on private label, and I was like, yeah, like I'll check that out later. I kept on putting it back, kept on putting it back. And then like right when I got involved with private label, which was after college, I like hit myself in the head, and I was like, oh, dude, if I would have gotten in at the prime peak vitamin C serum garlic press time, that would have been crazy.
That's what we all say, which is funny. Like I used to say this about wholesale. I put off wholesale for like 2 years because I'm like, nah, man, that's for the big boys. Like you got to have tens of thousands of dollars. And now people come to me, they're like, how much do I need? I'm like, honestly, like $500 is plenty to get started with.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Having perspective, once you understand how things work and you're like, this is at no point as big of a deal as I thought it was. Everything changes. You're like, guys, no, it's really not that hard anymore. like it got tougher, but
I know.
man.
That's why when people ask about starting, it's like, no, really, I wish I was in your shoes. Like, I wish I would have just started in this way, because it's all about time in the market, just like stocks or investing or other things. Time in the market beats out having the perfect timing with anything.
Yeah. It's like compounding your effort to a certain degree, where like the quicker you can get started, even if you fumble around for a long period of time, that's okay, because at least you're a few steps ahead, and you can, like, the next step for you isn't 0 to 1, it's 1 to 2 or 3 to 4 or 5 to 6, right? but you still have to go through those. So the quicker you can go through that and just understand you're going to fail and you're going to mess up and you're going to call a supplier and be like, I don't know what to say. Bye. And just hang up. Dude, it's fine. Like, it's going to happen.
Exactly. No,
it happens to me all the time.
No, it happens to everybody. That's the thing. After college, basically, I got plugged into Viral Launch, which if you're listening and you're not aware, Viral Launch is, I would say, one of the leading companies to help Amazon sellers in general, and that's wholesale, private label, arbitrage, everything. And Casey Goss, who's the CEO, went to the college that I went to and then dropped out. He dropped out, and that's kind of how I got connected to him through another friend of mine, name's Lindsay. And so I just started working at Viral Launch. Casey brought me on to be a face of the company to help kind of alleviate some pressure for him, just in terms of talking to people, introducing the company to people, representing the company. And so through that, that's how I got a really deep dive into the Amazon space, private label specifically, but I met a lot of people. I met top sellers in every single space of Amazon. I actually ran my own podcast for the company. It's called Follow the Data. And so through that, I met a lot of people, learned a lot of different tactics, learned what works, what doesn't work, and really just took the deepest dive into Amazon that I've taken so far. And so that's where I'm at now. That's how I got introduced to the Amazon space. I no longer work for Viral Launch, actually. I chose to separate. I chose to take off. I moved to Los Angeles to kind of start my own thing, which was selling on Amazon, actually, just to really focus in on that for myself.
That's awesome. And it's funny you bring up the podcast, because I remember listening to a few episodes when I finally found it. I'm like, this is really like focused on tech and innovation, which is not normal in our industry, right? It's very like, here's a tactic. It's not, let's take things back. Let's think from first principles. Let's talk about the data side of things. Let's make informed decisions, not just because some guru said, hey, this is the way to do it. It's no, we actually ran some tests and looked at the data and like, this is what it's saying, not just our intuition. It's, what every other industry does for some reason, but we have tons of data, right? So it's this odd situation where we have tons of data as sellers. Some's easier to get than others, but having that data and being able to use it in your competitive advantage is huge. So I like that you guys focus on that. Actually, I think I remember seeing you on like a YouTube video, like early in the days for Viral Launch. As you say this, I'm like, I remember watching that too. Yeah, that's so funny. Okay, so you go through all that, you end up going your own route, and I know what you focus on a lot now is that mental game, and that's really what we're going to talk about, is understanding how to put things into perspective, dealing with failures, and what, in my opinion, is the biggest hurdle outside of capital, outside of getting suppliers. Everything else is peanuts compared to the mental game. So let's dive into that a bit. How do you approach that?
Man, you're 100% right. I think when you say that the mental game is, if not one of the most important things, if not the most important things when it comes to Amazon, but also business in general. And I think it's really important for people to listening, even if you're getting started, no matter what, like you're a business person, you're involved with business right now. I think that's easy to forget. I talk with so many sellers who honestly didn't even realize that they're running a business.
It's just like this little side thing I do for funds.
yeah, exactly. Like even if you're flipping t-shirts, you're buying t-shirts from Goodwill and you're selling them on eBay, like you're running a business and you got to pay taxes and you got to do all this stuff. Like, and I think that people forget that. And if you're involved with work, like any sort of work or just living life, the mental game is huge. And so, I mean, your question, where do you start? That's a really ambitious question to answer, because everyone's starting at a different spot, or is at a different spot in their business, but everyone's also coming to the table with their own kind of state of mental clarity, of mental health, and of mental stability. And so I think answering that question of where you start, first I think everyone has to take a step back and really ask themselves where they're at right now with mental health and with mental stability. Because if your mental health is just really, really low, and mental health means a lot of different things, that's going to bleed into a lot of different areas of business and of just like mental clarity when it comes to running an Amazon business. And so some people, I think, would separate the two and say, well, my mental health is over here, but my mental clarity when it comes to running Amazon is over here. But I picture them as clearly intertwined together. So I think it really starts with everyone taking a step back and asking themselves, well, how stable am I mentally? How strong is my mental state right now?
I think it's being self-aware, right? It's asking those tough questions, and it's not asking yourself like, am I mentally unstable? Like, it's not to that degree, but it's being aware. Like mindfulness comes to play, right? Where there's certain days I can wake up and know, you know what, today's going to be a low energy day. So I know I need to work around that. And there's certain things that I try to do to overcome that and prepare to reduce the amount of times that happens. But it's going to happen, right? You're going to get burnt out sometimes. But what you can do is start to be aware of, you know, what was different about yesterday, last night, this morning that caused this? Or what's some proactive things that I can do? Like, I know for me, it's easy to be so focused on the outcome that you forget all the things you have in that gratefulness. So, okay, at night, write down 5 things you're grateful for. That influences the next day. So it's not necessarily looking at the negative sides of stability of your mental game, but it's just being aware of this is your landscape. And there's little things I think you can do to start playing within that landscape that is your own, and kind of bend it to your will to a certain degree. But you're always going to have those ups and downs, but you got to be aware, you know?
I would 100% agree. I think the mental, talking about like mental game, it's just intentionality, really. It's taking a moment to stop and ask yourself, or just even remind yourself of what you accomplished, but B, also what you have ahead. Oftentimes what I saw sellers getting really hung up on is they would just chug along. They just like charge forward into whatever is next. So they would tackle putting their listing up on Amazon, and then they would be like, all right, I gotta learn Facebook ads. I gotta put my stuff up on Shopify. I gotta find 5 more products, and also I just have to get get sales running to my first product, and then get overwhelmed with all this stuff. And I think that if you don't take a moment to stop and just think about what you did and where you're coming from, instead of the path becoming or being this like linear thing, it just becomes this really big jumbled mess, which I'm guessing that a lot of people listening have experienced or are definitely experiencing right now, this feeling of like confusion, jumbled thoughts, not really knowing where to go. And like you said, taking a moment to stop and think about what you did, what you accomplished, whether it was this week or this day, and what you're going to do tomorrow to help kind of push that thing forward, really, in my mind, and from what I've experienced, from what I've seen other sellers do, helps kind of de-jumble all of that mess and kind of make that linear path pretty clear as you start moving forward.
I think you're in one of two camps too. You can have, let's consider it the same vision, but 2 different realities of that vision, where, for lack of a better on time analogy, if you're at the base camp of a mountain, that mountain can either be a volcano that you're like, oh my God, I don't want to climb this thing, or it's Mount Everest and you've been working really hard to get there, right? So that perception of, is that a positive mountain? Is it a daunting mountain that you're reluctantly climbing, in which case I question why you would even attempt to climb it? And that's not questioning why are you doing this, but it's getting you to shift your mindset of, is that a positive vision of your life, or is it a negative one? And that starts to ask more questions, right? Becoming more self-aware of, well, why? Like, I love asking this question to sellers, is like, why are you actually doing this? Why are you actually getting into this? And I learned this being a personal trainer, where you peel back layers. It's like, oh, well, I want to do this. Well, why does that matter? Why does it matter to you to have an extra $2,000 to $5,000 a month in cash flow? Why does it matter that you have more time with your family? And certain things, when you ask these questions, they're like, well, isn't it obvious? I'm like, Maybe, but have you asked the question? Have you answered the question? And eventually it's like, well, I want to be able to see my kid take their first step, or be more present in their daily lives, help them do their homework every single night. Okay, that's more important than you having this quote unquote successful Amazon business, right? But when you view everything you have to do in terms of tasks, in terms of climbing that mountain from that lens, everything else is different because you put context on it, and then it gets less daunting. Now it's more like, yeah, let's get there, right? Like, it's a positive outcome.
Simon Sinek's like Start With Why, or
love it, yeah.
Gary V. Gary V. I find this very interesting. Gary V. saying that he wakes up. Who knows if he does this every single day, but saying that he wakes up every single day thinking about his family dying, or what it would be like if his family would just die. And that's a very extreme like mentality to have, or picture to have. But the point of that is him refocusing on his why, right? Or all of us waking up and reminding ourselves of why we do what we do. And I think that's challenging for an Amazon seller, because it is so task oriented and it's so numbers oriented. But if you can wake up every single day, and this is what I'm challenging myself to do now, because of course we all go through ebbs and flows of motivation, but also just like, why do I do what I do? And if you can really, like you said, peel back those layers and like be just 100% honest with yourself. If you're doing it for money, then you're doing it for money. But if you're doing it for money to get to something else, like to spend more time with your family, to spend more time with your friends, to have the freedom to travel because you really want to travel, like peel back those layers until you get to that why, the reason why, and use that as the basis for reminding yourself of why you do what you do, which then when you encounter failure, which maybe this is a pretty good segue into a really big topic of failure. When you encounter failure, you have that essence. Like Gary Vee has the fear of his family just dying one day, and it's him doing what he does for his family, making the most for his family, right? To motivate him to keep on going. If you have a really powerful base of why, which comes with the mental game, then you'll be able to kind of push beyond everything that happens when you fail or when you encounter really big challenges.
I think it's a shift from a selfish goal to a selfless purpose. And I think there's two kinds of purposes, right? There's a real purpose behind what you're doing, which is what we've been talking about. And then there's that Instagram purpose, where it's simply a comparable of what you see other people doing, and you just want it because you see other people, you see the highlight reel of it, right? This is super fascinating to me, being a quote unquote millennial, and like being aware of this stuff, because it's so funny, because I'll see myself scroll through Instagram, and now I hide it so I don't look at it. I'd be like, yeah, but that person's doing this. Okay, what does that matter though? It doesn't. Look at what we're doing. And again, it's shifting perspective. But leading into the next thing, which is dealing with the negativity, dealing with failure. If you don't have that purpose behind what you're doing, that first failure, even though it's incredibly small, it feels huge, and it's hard for you to overcome it if you even get to that point of being willing to fail. So walk me through some failure stuff, because I think this is a big crux for a lot of people.
I want to talk about failure with Amazon specifically, and from what I've seen with Amazon sellers, and from what also I've experienced myself, and I've seen and I've worked with sellers that have been all the way at the bottom, started with nothing, and sellers who were making millions of dollars a month, like that I've met and who I've talked with about strategy, and who have just are running insane operations right now. And I think they would all say the same thing, and we already mentioned it, that no matter what happens, you will experience a lot of failure as you start and as you continue. If you move forward with the expectation that everything's going to be fine, then you will be setting yourself up to experience a heavier hit when you do come across failure. And I had sellers who, I knew a lot of sellers who had a fear of moving forward because they did not want to fail, right? So I was talking to this one lady at an Amazon conference, and she said, I forget exactly what she said, but we were it was a small focus session. and she didn't have a product up yet, and she was asking us for advice, and I forget how it got started, but basically she asked the question like, well, what if it doesn't work? Like, what if my product doesn't work? And there was a panel of maybe 4 or 5 higher level sellers, and I was on that panel, and we all just kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, then you keep on going. Like, you really have to ask yourself if you'll be financially okay, if you'll be physically okay. Like, you got to have all the basic, hierarchy needs met. Like, you can provide for yourself, you can eat food, you have a place to stay. But when failure happens, when it comes, you have to take that hit, and you just have to keep on going. You have to, if you launch a product, if you're wholesaling, if you're doing private label, you're going to have a failed product. I had a product that failed, and it's still failing. And it's been a huge, oh man, I put so much into this product, and it was in the same. So I'm in a pretty design oriented market, right? And I do private label, like, exclusively. I'm in a very design oriented market, and we got the first couple designs really well. They hit home. Like, people really liked the designs, and so bought the product. And we had this idea for another design that was a little bit out there, and we were like, oh man, people will love this design. People will love this design. Huge flop, man. Huge.
And then the market corrected you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You can't dictate what the market will buy. You cannot dictate what people are going to buy. And we were so sure, like, the art is just good. I myself still think that the design is good, but the market does not. And so then now we're stuck with all of this product. And this was during the time of where it was like Christmas time, where storage fees were going to get like huge, right? And so we had to decide what to do. I have a business partner out here that's who I work with for our business. We had to decide between keeping all of our product in inventory and getting charged tens of thousands of dollars for excess inventory for storage fees, or taking them out and keeping them somewhere, or destroying them. And, we took the hit, and now we have thousands of this product in storage that we're still trying to figure out what to do. And you know what? We put a lot of time, money, and energy into this product. But at the end of the day, luckily, of course, we still have other products that are doing well to sustain us. But at the end of the day, I took a huge loss financially, but also time-wise with this product. And now I have thousands of them that I have no idea what to do with. So what do I do? If I was in another spot, well, I could take this and say, like, this was the last product that we launched. And so we have a handful of good products that are running. Only 2 of them in this market that are doing well. So we have 3 products in this market total. 2 are flops, 2 are doing well. 1's a flop. I could take a look. I could look at this and say, I'm not going to put any more products in this market because the chances of it being a flop, it's too much. I'm too scared. But no, I am taking that as this failure of this product as a learning experience. And I'm saying, okay, I took a financial hit, took the time hit, and I have a bunch of this product that I don't know what to do with. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing because I would stop on my whole operation altogether. I'm going to take that as a learning experience, say, like, you know what? We all fail. We all experience failure. Use that moving forward, put out another product. If it fails, that's also another learning experience. I'm just got to push past that. I'm going to ask myself, am I financially stable? Can I still keep on launching another product and still be fine financially? But the answer for me right now is yes. So I'm going to keep on going.
Today's episode is brought to you by GoAura.com, our AI-based repricing tool. If you're ready to take your sales to the next level, repricing is the way to go. No more manually adjusting your prices each day. Let our AI actually do the heavy lifting for you. And if you're sick of repricing tools dropping their activity and leaving you in the dark, Aura can help. With smart repricing strategies, an optimized platform, and instant repricing, Aura both reprices faster and holds the buy box for 65% more time than competing repricers. If you're ready to experience repricing reimagined, head over to goaura.com to start your 14-day free trial.
Yeah, I think there's a few tactics in there that a few I've used myself and a few that come to mind. It's easy because I do some consulting every now and then, or even just with our Facebook group where, we'll just jump onto a live, answer questions. It's very easy and clear in my mind when somebody asks you, what should I do in this situation? Because you're removed. And so it's easy to be like, oh, this is the easy route for you to go. This is what I would suggest you do. When it's you, it's hard for you to step outside of the spectrum, if you will. But you can say, okay, let's write down the problem. Let's assume somebody gave me this and asked, how would you answer this? And just answer it. Write it down. It's not something you're contractually obligated to. You're just going to write out, if this was like a question on a test, how would you solve this? I'd say 8, maybe even 9 times out of 10, it's a pretty easy thing for you to overcome. But what I've heard a few times, and I'm starting to really appreciate it the older I get, is paying tuition, which is not actually paying your, financial institution, not that, right? Like the platitude version of you lost. Okay, did you though? Maybe not. It depends on how you view it. But the way you could turn that around is, well, no, we did our research. We paid to get told yes or no. And the market, if you will, came back and said, yeah, just not this design. Okay, so don't do more of that. But if you go straight by the numbers and do, incremental analysis, which gotta love finance, it can take some of the emotions out, right? But you can say, well, yeah, but 2/3 of what we've done has been fine. So 1/3, okay, you know what I mean? Like that's fine. But you launch that fourth win, and let's say you take what you learned from that 1/3, apply it, and it does good. Okay, so now you're 3/4. Dramatically changes things, right? So I love building in, risk mitigation, especially when it comes to wholesale, because you're placing orders that you're testing on an already existing listing. Granted, it's not as big as private label, I would imagine. But you're testing because you don't know. Just because, all these tools estimate sales volumes and it's like, this is what it should be. Cool. We call that an estimate for a reason because it's a statistical number. That doesn't mean it's math. Math and stats are completely different. But you're testing, and sometimes it's wrong, and that's okay. But, I tell people all the time that say, well, I'm scared of losing. Okay. I can promise you will lose some money. I can, right? Like, because we're going to.
Yes.
Like, you can do everything right and still miss something. And there is a learning curve here, and experience does help. But understanding that you don't know everything, in my opinion, helps a ton, because you're like, I'm looking for where I would mess up. I'm looking for red flags. But if I do mess up, I'm like, okay, yeah, I expected this. Let's keep moving on. And another thing that helped me a lot too was perspective. If you're a quote unquote seller, it's vastly different. And you mentioned this earlier, than running a business. Little hits are massive when you're just a seller. When you're running a business and you're thinking not in the next 1 to 3 months, but you're thinking the next 2 to 5 years or the next 10 to 20 years, having a bad month, a bad year even, is completely irrelevant within that time scale. So you have to kind of zoom out a bit and be like, well, is this something I just want to do this year and play around with? Or is this something I'm trying to build for the next 10 to 20 years? The decisions you make are vastly different, and how you handle that negativity, handle failure, which is inevitable, changes dramatically. I like how you, even I was watching you as you were talking through you going through that flop. And it's funny because when it's just you by yourself thinking it through, that conversation's vastly different than when you have to vocally say it, because you're like, yeah, I know it's bad, but it's not that bad. Like, but you're like, oh yeah, okay, my bad. Like, we do it to ourselves, exactly. Right? It's so easy. It's absolutely insane. I not to get woo-woo, because it's not, but like, that's why I started meditating at night, just because it's a good way for me to stabilize that volatility, that emotional volatility of being an entrepreneur and just trying to figure things out. Because half the time you have no clue what you're doing. Like, that's the big secret of entrepreneurship. Nobody knows.
You may have told your audience this a lot. I'm not sure, but you mentioned meditation. Meditation, game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, game changer. Do you know what the Enneagram is? Do you know what that is?
I don't.
You should check it out. It's really cool.
Okay.
The Enneagram, it's another kind of type test, kind of like the MBTI, but in my opinion, a little more specific and just a little better. But it really helps. If you utilize it right, it can really help you understand yourself better and how to best serve yourself, but also how to really make the most of kind of what you're doing. And it's huge for business, in my opinion. So I would say check out the Enneagram. I'm a type 3. A type 3 is an achiever, meaning just like a love, of course, like of achieving, of doing, of running, always kind of on the go. And so I never wanted to give time to something like journaling or something like meditation, because I was just like, well, I could use that time to just do stuff, you know?
You don't feel like you're making progress, quote unquote.
Yeah. Like, I'll just work on my ad copy, or I'll work on something else instead of just like taking 10 minutes to sit. But once I started, I've really been doing it probably, I'm not going to say every day, but I would say on average about maybe 3 or 4 days a week, every morning, taking time before I do anything to get up, make some coffee, and just practice my breathing and meditation for probably maybe even like 15 minutes. And that is something that breathing is huge. And I know guys like Tim Ferriss or guys like Ben Greenfield can get into this state of breathing. They can get into that meditation state like within a couple seconds, because they've trained themselves how to breathe and diaphragm movement and everything like that. But taking the time to sit still and breathe before your day gets started, or at the end of your day, in my opinion, is one of the biggest things that have really helped prepare me for failure, for mental clarity, for effectiveness in business and everything. I would say if you're listening and you haven't at least given it a shot for like 2 weeks, as I do it for 2 weeks, and then come back and say it's useless, because I think you'll find that it's the opposite of that. It's a very, very useful thing once you start doing it really consistently.
Yeah, I'm glad we've kind of gotten rid of the whole stigma of meditation as woo-woo and religious. It's not. It's scientific at this point, which is really nice. But even 5 minutes, and the way I like to kind of contextualize it for me is it's a bookend of either, the beginning of the day or you're done. So you don't have this bleed over emotionally of today sucked. Does that mean tomorrow has to suck? Do you have to bring in the perspective, the context of this sucks into tomorrow? Or can you take 5-10 minute timeout, reset, and be like, all right, tomorrow's gonna be better. Let's just treat it as a completely new day. And it's easy to say, I'm just going to treat every day as a new day. And it's another thing to do it. So and one thing too, it helps you get into a state of flow. Like, this isn't talked about a whole lot in our industry, and I wish some of the stuff was. Stealing Fire is a good book on this state of flow where you basically lose sense of time, right? So as a kid, when you were playing in, what seemed to be 1 hour ended up being 10, that's a state of flow. Or even in reverse sometimes. You can use that to your advantage while working, right? So you can get into a state of flow while you're working. It's not something I don't believe you can control necessarily, but there's certain things you can do to help position yourself to be in a better state of flow. So let's say you have to make 10 phone calls today to suppliers. Well, that's not really like a sexy, exciting thing to do. But if you can get yourself into a state of flow, having a conversation with somebody, it's less daunting because you're more focused on the present conversation than you are on the outcome of say yes, say yes, say yes. And this is something I talk about all the time. When you're trying to get a supplier to approve you, which is obviously really hard, you forget the fact that you're having a conversation with a human and you negate all emotional things, right? It's like, I tell people all the time, like, smile before you call, because people can hear that, right? People can hear that you're smiling. And being able to joke with a supplier who we call them suppliers, but really it's Deborah, it's John, whatever. Get them to laugh at little things. It's okay to build some personal rapport and then have that Amazon conversation. They're more likely to approve you because of that. But when you're too focused on the outcome, on getting approved or not being rejected or not wanting to face failure, you negate all that. When you kind of stop caring about the outcome and you care more about the process, a lot of things begin to change. And I've experienced this in multiple facets of life.
Yeah, I along those lines, I really started doing something that for me, it's what I needed to do for myself to really improve my mental state, my mental clarity, and also really just like get in the zone more. It's a long term, I'd say a macro move, and it might sound dumb to you, and if it does, I challenge you to really consider actually doing this, because I thought it wouldn't be useful, just like meditation, but because I thought that, I tried it out. Really challenge myself to do it. What is it? So it's basically stopping to smell the roses. So I think that this is something that a lot of people don't do now, just because, again, we're so like on to the next thing. And I know that a lot of Amazon sellers don't do this as well, because there are so many things to do that are lined up for your planning for the day, for the week, whatever. But it's whatever you do, no matter like how big or how small, it's taking just even a second to just like stop and say, hey, I did that. Like I accomplished this thing. Like taking a step back and realizing that I did this when it first happened, when I was first starting my first product. Like my business partner and I took a step back and we're like, hold up. We just imported product from China. Like, that's crazy.
That wasn't even like a possibility like 20 to 30 years ago without it being dramatically expensive. Like,
no, it's insane. Like to take a step back and to realize like, hey, I just sold my first product on Amazon, or I just started my business. You realize not many people have started a business or even have the desire to start something like this. So even if it's really, really small, like, hey, I just talked to my first supplier and it went well, or even if it didn't go well, hey, I just talked to my first supplier. Taking a second to stop and realize, and honestly, like either make a mental note or an actual physical note saying, keeping track, or a video record saying like, hey, today I did this, this, and this. It gives you a second to really appreciate what you've done. It gives you a really positive feeling that honestly, I was surprised at how well it worked, and empowers you to do more as you move forward. Because I got stuck in this rut, probably over this past year. I got stuck in this rut of just doing and then moving on to the next thing, and doing. And I got burnt out because I was doing so much, but also I wasn't giving myself any credit. And I'm a words of affirmation guy. So really for me to hear that for myself was so important. And once I started, I forget who I heard, who was actually a friend of mine, who's just like, yo, dude, you gotta appreciate what you're doing more. And I was just like, maybe I'll give that a shot. I'll give a shot, me telling myself, even though I feel kind of dumb doing it, like, yo, Cam, good job for doing that. You did a really good job.
It feels dumb until you do it enough times and you're like, no, this is like my life hack. So it's funny. I have Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss here on my desk. And in one of the chapters, they talk about the jar of awesome. And so, literally get like a jar, right?
Yes.
And little sticky notes. And as cool things happen, write it down, stick it in the jar. When you're having a shitty day, go back over, take out a handful and read them. It's funny, in our Facebook group, we have a new member and she's been very vocal, which has been super fun. And she called her first supplier and didn't get approved. But instead of being like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, which, because you have a sample size of one, like you can't really make that statement. She's like, no, I'm so glad that I did this. I got that first one out. It wasn't like, it was kind of like scary, but now that it's done and I can think about it, it's really not that daunting. And I know where I messed up. That's okay. Like almost like debrief from it. And she's excited, to call the next, but it's putting perspective on things. Like I keep coming back to like context and perspective, because I think it does shift your mental stance on things. And because like I'm a words of affirmations person as well, like that's my thing, so even getting an email from somebody I don't really know personally that listened to the podcast or read our blog content was like, hey, this was super helpful, like I'm glad you guys did this. I'm like, sweet, let's go do more, right?
Yeah.
I get it. And it's hard when, I think this is another pitfall too of being a small business owner, especially in this space, is although there's a huge community of sellers, it's still very lonely.
Oh yeah.
Because nobody wants to talk about failing. Nobody wants to be like, this week honestly just sucked. Everybody wants to be like, no, I'm crushing it. Hustle. It's like,
and all you see if you've ever attended a conference or you see videos, especially with all the like entrepreneur stuff that's going on, hustle culture, all that, all you see from sellers like on stage or something is just like success. And for a lot of almost every seller I know, when they started out or at any point in time, it's like comparing themselves to whoever is above them, right? They think, well, all these sellers are making millions of dollars, and maybe in their mind then it becomes like all sellers are making millions and I'm just making $100 a week. I can't, I'm not as good. I'm not doing well. I must be doing something wrong. And then maybe that just bleeds into their whole business where they're just like, I just might not do it. When in fact, maybe they were doing just as well as like a large number of other sellers. Just no one's talking about all of that. The state of comparison is huge. It's enormous in Amazon, but no one's actually, like, people aren't actually comparing accurately. They're not looking at the whole picture. All they're seeing is some really small snapshot of really, really successful sellers who are talking about where they're at, when in fact they don't see all the failures that those sellers went through themselves. And they also don't see the large majority of sellers over here on the other side who are in the exact same spot as them. Like, the act of comparison, from what I've seen, is maybe one of the biggest kind of drawbacks, or the biggest things that can cause an Amazon business, specifically any business, but talking about this space specifically because it's so tight knit. The act of comparison is something that can really destroy a business from the ground up. It's almost like you got to really just like stick to your guns when you're running an Amazon business and say, like, you know what? No, this is me. This is my path. This is what I'm doing. And this is where I'm at. It does not matter where anyone else is right now. This is where I am. And I'm going to take it from here and keep on going.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And it's easy to say, well, all these people are doing X dollars in revenue. Why am I not? Well, one, you've been doing this for 6 months. They've been doing it for 5 years. That's one thing. It could even be that they came to the start point with 50 grand in capital and you got 2 grand. Does that mean you can't succeed? Of course not. It's a different situation. You really, I think, and I've learned this, and I like to reread the 4-Hour Work Week, not to keep going back to Tim Ferriss, but he's got some good stuff.
He does.
Where he talks about being blind while you're in this kind of startup phase. Because now, are there certain things that are important for you to read and learn about? Of course. But to consistently look at a lot of things, even in like Facebook groups where it's all success, does that add you any value? Not really. I would actually say it adds negative value unless you're killing it, because it only fuels you positively if you're in a positive state, but it fuels you much more negatively if you're in a negative state, right? So, even if it's our Facebook group, like, I try very hard, and hopefully it shows to show that side of things, right? Where it's not selling the outlier fantasy of what's possible, because it's easy to say what's possible with this. It's easy to say you can scale this out as high as you want. And I say this all the time, it's simple, not easy. And the reason why I say that is because of this mental game that we're talking about. But, you do need to focus more on the realities of things. So we had a user when we were doing our Facebook Live who was like, hey, I got my third wholesale product. This is awesome. I'm like, great. I'm not just going to celebrate that though. Let's extrapolate that a bit. How many suppliers did you call to get those 3? It's like, I called over 90. I was like, okay, this proves my point. And he's like, and I told him, okay, so if you want to double, you need to go call 100 more.
That's the math, right? We're talking conversion rates here, right? This is sales to a certain degree. And, we've had users that were like, I called my first 10, didn't get anything, was devastated. But now that I have the perspective of really, you need to call 100 before you can even remotely have any emotional ties to an outcome. They're doing much better than those who say, yeah, but I called 10 and it didn't work out. It's just not enough, right? You have to have the reality. And it's easy to dismiss and have that experience and say, well, it's saturated now. It's too late. No, it's not. We just talked to Larry Labarsky and he's like, dude, it's never too late. He's like, is it tougher? Of course it is. It's always going to get tougher. It's a low barrier to entry, a high barrier to succeeding. And I don't even think that barrier to succeeding is that much higher, really. It's just doing a few things right. And you mentioned, people, that emotional state. And I think what really drives a lot of what I would say model jumping of, I tried private label, I didn't do well, I'm going to go do wholesale. I tried wholesale for 2 months, it didn't do well, I'm going to go do OA. Because you're constantly looking for the next fantasy to buy into, and then you get hit with the realities. You're like, this is tough. I'm telling you right now, this is always tough, and it's work. When you're building a real business, it's work, right?
Yeah. And if you go back 6 years ago when Amazon was just starting and it was quote unquote a cinch to get in. Guess what? There were still people there then who tried putting out a product and it didn't work, and they were like, oh, well, Amazon must not work. But no, there were just like kind of less things to figure out to kind of get the formula right. Then there are many more now. But like you said, the opportunity is always now. If that person or people who failed back then to do something like private label or whatever, if they kept on going, kept on getting at it and found the right formula, found the right combination of things to kind of reduce the risk and increase their chances of success, they'd be in a much different spot now. But just like now, getting like really, really kind of specific, I mean, the Amazon game is not what it was 6 years ago. It's not what it was 3 years ago. It's not what it was last year. Like getting into the Amazon game last year looks a lot different than it does right now. And it will look different in a year. But if you're to say that, oh, private label is dead, wholesale is dead, online arbitrage is dead, retail arbitrage is dead. No, I truly don't think that they ever will die. But the barrier to entry is at a different spot than it was before. However, also have different tools and resources now than we ever did. So the game, it's not that something will ever die, it's just that the game will always continue to change as time goes on. And it's like, are you willing to adapt to that change?
Yeah, it's like, are you trying to play checkers or chess? Because this is a game of chess, right? I mean, it's just, you have to be flexible, you have to be willing to adapt, because, and it's irregardless of the business model you get into. Let's say you're getting into tanning salons. Okay, that landscape can change. I don't know if it does, like laundromats, right? That's got to change at some point. Yeah. But you have to be willing to be flexible, be adaptive. And, for me personally, my own perspective, I see the landscape actually getting better for sellers who are willing to overcome some relatively small hurdles. I think there's a moat being built around sellers right now, which is not a bad thing, even if you're getting started, because you can still get inside of that. It's not hard. It's probably a little bit more tedious. Okay. So, the rate of growth in new products coming online every single day, whether it's private label, OA, RA, wholesale, it's relevant. The growth rate of Amazon as a marketplace, as a platform, is so large and consistently increasing. I don't see it being an issue. I mean, we have over 5,000 wholesale sellers in our Facebook group, and we've yet to have, or at least see, any overlap with products, and we're all doing wholesale. So,
wow.
I feel like that's a large enough sample size, probably not in comparison to the amount of sellers there are, period, but it's large enough to at least have a pulse on what's happening in comparison to Amazon changes and stuff like that. But I don't see it getting harder. I think it's maybe 1% to 2% tougher, but that's enough for people who are in this negative mindset, who are frustrated already. They feel like they're always, because I get it. Like and when I first got started, for the first 3 to 4 months, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just trying to figure it out on my own, and I struggled, didn't do anything.
And I felt like there was always a piece of the puzzle I couldn't find. I just didn't know what it was, right? So that equates to more courses, that equates to buying wholesale lists, things that actually didn't help me make progress. But in hindsight, when I realized that, I stepped back from it and said, you know what? I probably do know enough. Let's just do it. Because what you are missing, that last piece of the puzzle, is actually just experience. It's having a reference point. It's being able to understand, okay, I sent in my first wholesale order. It did well. What do I have to learn from that? That's the missing piece. The missing piece of the puzzle is doing the work. So for people who are able to get through that and be willing to be adaptive, I think you're going to do really good. I have no doubts. I'm so optimistic about the next 20 years on so many different levels. It's ridiculous.
I'm actually a believer that, I don't think we've seen this yet, but I'm a believer that Amazon sellers, people who are getting into Amazon, this is macro in terms of everyone's life as a whole. I think this will lead into a lot of things that are just huge, that are beyond just private label, just wholesale, just all these things. Not to make those things seem small, but I think that from what I've seen, other Amazon sellers who have done really, really well, they've unlocked what they sought out originally, which was maybe more time or more money or more freedom, whatever it was. And then from that, Amazon has enabled them to accomplish some crazy things outside of Amazon. Like whether it's starting another business in a completely different realm that's financed by Amazon, whatever it is. I think that we have yet to see kind of the true fruit of a macro level, lifelong thing that Amazon is enabling us, whoever's listening, to do. And I think as the years go on and people discover themselves more and discover what business is like and discover making money online, I mean, it's only going to keep on going up, right? The online opportunity is just going to keep on going. Like Facebook, who knows what's next for social media? Who knows what's next for all this stuff? Who knows what's next for Amazon? Like even Jeff Bezos said, his goal is to prevent the downhill. I forget what exactly he said, but his goal is to stop and prevent kind of the downfall of Amazon for as long as possible. And so things will always change, but Amazon is providing an opportunity for us to find ourselves and to find whatever's next on top of what we're doing now. But now the focus, of course, is like selling on Amazon and all this stuff. But I'm a believer that we'll see some pretty crazy fruit come from whatever's happening right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to position things and to view Amazon as a catalyst for other things. I remember hearing Ryan Moran talk about this, where it's starting a cash flow business that can enable you to start a disruptive business. Because although I would argue right now, raising money is fairly cheap and easy, you might not want to do that. You might want to say, you know what, let's get this cash flow business up and running. Let's get it doing well, and let's use that to finance what I really want to do. Again, we're talking about playing chess, not checkers. That's very much a chess move, right? Let's go here so we can finance our own thing. There's so many ways you can approach this business, whether it's this specific business model within Amazon or not. There's so much value there, and it all comes back to, why are you doing it? All comes back to the purpose. Absolutely crucial. Well, Cameron, man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. This was super cool. I'm glad we got to geek out on a few similar things. That's great.
Same.
Where are a few places that people can find you if they want to reach out, read some of your content, and kind of get plugged into you?
Yeah, honestly, Instagram or Facebook would probably be the best place. I mean, you talked about Amazon being an enabler for something else. And right now, I mean, I started in Amazon so that I'd be able to go into create content for mental stability. I am creating content right now. The channel's not out, but I'm creating content for a channel surrounding mental illness, anxiety, and depression, and what people can do to be aware of it, but also get through it if they're going through that stuff. And I have my own story with everything like that. But if you have any questions or you just want to reach out, feel free to reach out on Instagram or Facebook at all, because I'll be there.
Awesome. And we'll have all those links in the show notes at vendrive.com/podcast. Cameron, thank you, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Before we leave, I have a huge ask.
If you enjoyed this podcast and you got value from it, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. The way we're able to have more impact on more sellers is by getting in front of them. We can do that by having more reviews and getting pushed to the top of iTunes podcasts. So leave us a review and let us know what you think of the podcast.